She opened my passenger door like she'd rehearsed it, leaned close enough for her perfume to blur the world, and whispered, "Will you marry me?" I was idling under the oaks by the river, phone buzzing with another reminder I'd ignored. The word marry hung in the car like a flare. I didn't answer, my hands locked on the wheel as if it were the last railing on a bridge. She looked 33, hair tucked behind one ear, eyes bright after rain. Not a prank, not drunk. Her gaze waited careful, as if a wrong move might crack thin ice. 10 minutes earlier, I'd finished an airport run. I drive nights after my loading dock shift because divorce eats money like fire eats dry grass. 40 isn't old until the bills keep arriving with your name and someone else's memories attached. I keep the car clean. She smiled steady, unafraid. Just drive, please. The please loosened me. I pulled away from the curb. The river slid by, gold and broken. She watched the mirrors and the sky, measuring how fast the world could catch her. "My name's Sophie Clark," she said at the first light. "You look trustworthy." I almost laughed, but her voice carried dense. I gave my name. She asked how late I worked. I said, "Midnight, sometimes later." "Good," she said. "Night makes sense." We crossed downtown, past the shuttered bakery where my ex and I used to meet for handoffs with our daughter. Tuesdays, our pizza. The ache still showed up. Sophie Clark glanced at my hands like she could read what they'd held. A ring I sold, a box I couldn't toss, the blanket our girl was wrapped in. It wasn't conversation, yet it felt reported. At a yellow light, she asked, "Do you take detours?" I said, "That's my specialty." She tapped an address into my phone. "The kind of hotel that wears good manners like a tux." "I won't be long," she said. "I just need to be seen arriving with someone with a spine." "You picked a stranger," I said. "Sometimes strangers are the only honest audience." We rolled beneath the canopy. She didn't reach for the handle. For a breath, she looked young, then older. "This is where the question came from," she said. "It isn't a joke. It isn't even romance. It's a door." She stepped out, then bent and looked back in. "Wait 10 minutes. If I come out alone, take me somewhere quiet." The door thudded. I counted the raindrops that weren't yet falling. 10 minutes is long when a story starts without your permission. I told myself I'd leave at 9. I stayed anyway. When she returned, the sheen in her eyes had changed like glass, remembering sand. She slid in damp air following. "Thank you," she said. "One more detour." We headed north where porches begin to repeat. She finally explained the whisper. Someone powerful wanted symbolism over love, and she'd been drafted. I pictured a man with a perfect watch and a hollow smile. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you look like you've already lost something and survived it." The clock nudged forward. I felt every year. "I'm not anyone's rescue," I said. "I didn't ask for rescue," she answered. "Only a witness. Maybe a driver who doesn't faint." The road opened, quiet as a church. I took the next turn without knowing why. Behind us, a life she refused kept calling. Ahead waited trouble that teaches your name. "Will you still help?" she asked. I could have said no. I could have told her I was tired, that I carry my days like boxes up an endless stair. Instead, I checked my mirrors, signaled, and heard myself say, "Point me." Sophie Clark didn't point at first. She leaned back in the seat, head tilted against the glass as though she'd been holding her breath for weeks, and finally let it go. The street lights striped her face in pale amber and shadow. I kept driving, pretending I had a plan. Truth was, every block felt borrowed. "Left up here," she murmured. Finally, I obeyed, turning into a part of town I hadn't visited in years, where the storefronts still smelled of paint and ambition, where couples held hands like they just discovered each other. She didn't explain why we were here, and I didn't ask. My life had taught me that silence sometimes answers better than questions. We ended up at a cafe tucked between a record store and a florist. I killed the engine. She straightened, touched her hair in the mirror, and smiled at me. "Coffee? You look like a man who lives on gas station sludge." "Let me fix that." Before I could argue, she was outside, her red heels clicking against the wet sidewalk. I followed inside. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. A couple of students typed on laptops. A man in a suit muttered into his phone. But Sophie Clark carried the kind of energy that turned heads. She ordered 2 coffees without consulting me, then slid into a booth near the window. When I sat, she leaned forward. "You probably think I'm crazy," she said. "Not crazy," I replied. "Confusing?" "Yes." That earned a laugh, soft but real. Confusing is safer than predictable. The coffees arrived. She wrapped her hands around the cup like it was a secret she needed to warm. "I was supposed to marry him," she said suddenly. "A man who thinks money is glue and women are wallpaper. He believes a vow is just a business merger." So I ran, her eyes locked on mine. "And when I saw you in that car tonight, you looked like someone who wouldn't sell me back to him." I didn't know what to say. My divorce papers still sat in a drawer at home. The ink dry but the ache still wet. "I'm not a hero," I said. "Good. Heroes are selfish. I only needed someone honest." For a moment, the noise of the cafe dulled. She smiled. Not the practice smile from earlier, but one that cracked something inside me. And just like that, Sophie Clark was no longer a stranger. She was a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. When we left, the night had thickened. I offered to drive her back to the hotel, but she shook her head. "Too many eyes. Take me somewhere ordinary. Somewhere you go when you want to forget." Ordinary? I thought of Sam Carter, my oldest friend, who lived above a hardware store and swore the smell of sawdust cured every heartbreak. Instead, I drove her to a late-night diner, the kind that still serves pie by the slice and doesn't mind if you linger. Sam Carter was there, of course. He spotted me the second we walked in and grinned like a thief caught in the act. "Nathan Wells," he called loud enough for half the diner to hear. "You finally brought a date who doesn't look like she's interviewing you for a loan." Sophie Clark laughed, unbothered, while my face burned. Sam Carter slid into our booth without invitation. "I'm Sam Carter," he said, offering his hand across the table. "And you are Sophie Clark?" she answered smoothly. Sam Carter studied her, then me, then back to her. "Careful with this guy. He fixes cars, but not hearts." "Good," Sophie Clark replied without missing a beat. "I'm not looking for repairs, just a ride." Sam Carter raised his brows at me, amused, but said nothing more. He eventually excused himself, but not before whispering, "Don't drown, Nathan Wells." When he was gone, Sophie Clark looked at me with a seriousness that erased the laughter from moments before. "That man you saw outside the hotel? He won't stop. He'll send people. Money makes loyalty cheap." "Then why tell me?" I asked. "Because you didn't flinch. Not when I whispered. Not when I asked you to drive. Not even now. You could have left me 10 times already, but you stayed." I didn't have an answer. I thought of my daughter, of how she once asked if I'd ever be happy again. Maybe Sophie Clark wasn't happiness. Maybe she was just momentum. But after years of stillness, momentum felt like mercy. We left the diner near midnight. Outside, the air was cool. The sky littered with indifferent stars. She touched my arm before climbing back into the car. "One more detour," she said, voice low, almost pleading. I nodded, started the engine, and pulled away from the glow of the diner's neon. Her reflection in the window was calm, but her hands trembled in her lap. Somewhere behind us, her past was closing in. Somewhere ahead, mine was catching up, and between them sat a woman who had whispered the strangest proposal I'd ever heard. One I couldn't forget, no matter how badly I tried. The third night began with silence. Sophie Clark sat in the passenger seat, her arms folded, her gaze fixed on the blur of street lamps sliding past the glass. I drove without asking where we were headed, the hum of the tires filling the space where words should have been. I'd learned that when Sophie Clark went quiet, it wasn't absence. It was armor. Halfway across town, she finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's story? Like you were cast in the wrong role?" I thought of my marriage, of all the years I'd played the dependable husband while my wife fell out of love in slow, invisible steps. Every day, I answered, her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "That's why I got in your car. You didn't look like a man who'd accept the script he was given. She gave me an address. When we arrived, I realized it wasn't another cafe or diner. It was a small park. Empty swings creaked in the night breeze. She got out first, walked ahead, then turned back to me. Come on, I need air. We sat on the swings like kids who'd stayed out too late. She leaned back, staring at the stars, while I pushed the gravel beneath my feet. For the first time, she began to open pieces of her past. The man she'd been promised to, his empire of glass towers and hidden debts. The way he used her smile like it was a business card. He wanted me polished, perfect, silent, she said. But silence kills. I thought if I ran, I'd be free. Turns out freedom isn't a place. It's people. Her voice cracked just enough for me to hear the weight beneath it. I wanted to say something, anything, but words felt like blunt tools against a lock this delicate. So I listened. Sometimes listening is the closest thing to courage. That was when headlights cut across the park. A black sedan slowed at the curb. Sophie Clark froze. My chest tightened. The driver's window rolled down just enough for a man's voice to carry across the grass. Sophie Clark, get in the car now. Her jaw clenched. She whispered, don't move. But my instincts shoved me to my feet. The man leaned forward, face shadowed but sharp. This doesn't concern you, he told me. Walk away. I didn't. My pulse hammered, but I stayed by Sophie Clark's side. She stood too, her hand brushing mine. Just enough contact to steady us both. Leave, she called back, her voice stronger than I expected. You don't own me anymore. The sedan lingered a moment, then peeled away, tires spitting gravel. The silence that followed was louder than the engine had been. Sophie Clark exhaled shakily, then sat back on the swing, burying her face in her hands. I told you he wouldn't stop, she whispered. He sends people to remind me, to scare me back into the cage. I lowered myself onto the swing beside her. Then he underestimated you and me. She looked up, eyes wet but burning. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. I wanted to tell her I didn't know myself lately either. That maybe helping her was the closest thing to feeling alive I'd found in years. Instead, I said, because you asked me to drive. And I said, yes. For the first time, Sophie Clark laughed through her tears. A fragile sound, but real. She wiped her face, then leaned against my shoulder. For a while, we sat there, the night wrapping around us, the swings swaying in unison. Later, as I drove her back toward the safer edges of town, she broke the quiet again. If you stay near me, he'll come after you, too. I've been chased before, I said. By mistakes, by debts, by ghosts. This feels different. This feels worth it. She turned to me, studying my face like she was measuring truth. Finally, she nodded. Then, maybe you're the first person who sees me as more than a contract. I didn't answer. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, but inside something had shifted. The woman who had slipped into my car with an impossible question was no longer just a mystery. She was a choice, and for the first time in years I wanted to choose. The night after the park felt heavier than the others. I could see it in Sophie Clark's shoulders as she slid into the passenger seat. In the way her fingers tapped against her thigh like she was counting down seconds no one else could hear. I asked her where she wanted to go. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, anywhere that isn't haunted. I drove without direction, letting the city blur into a rhythm of stoplights and storefronts. Eventually, we ended up on the edge of town where the neon faded into quiet streets. I parked near an old motel I used to pass on long-haul shifts. The sign flickered, half burned out, but the lot was empty. Sophie Clark leaned back in her seat. Do you ever wonder what life would look like if you'd said yes to the right person sooner? The question stung. I thought of my ex-wife, of the vows we'd made when we were too young to know how heavy forever could be. I think about it, I admitted. But the truth is, sometimes you only know the right person because you said yes to the wrong one first. She turned toward me, eyes shining even in the dim light. That's exactly what I ran from, being someone's wrong choice. Her words sat between us, raw and dangerous. I wanted to tell her she could never be anyone's mistake. Not when she carried herself like every step was defiance. But I kept quiet. My feelings weren't the point. Not yet. We sat there until the silence broke with headlights sweeping across the lot. A sleek black car slowed, then parked 2 rows away. Sophie Clark's breath hitched. My stomach sank. It wasn't the same sedan from the park. But the message was clear. He was watching. She gripped my arm. Nathan Wells, I can't keep running like this. I didn't think. I reached over, covering her trembling hand with mine. Then stop running. Stand with me. She blinked at me, her fear clashing with something softer, something dangerous. Slowly, she pulled her hand back, but not before squeezing mine once. You don't understand. If he sees us together, he'll think you're in the way. He'll destroy you just to prove a point. I leaned back, forcing calm into my voice. He doesn't scare me. Losing you does. The words surprised even me. Sophie Clark's lips parted, and for a long moment, she just stared. Then she whispered, "That's why I chose you. You didn't flinch when I asked the impossible." The car across the lot pulled away, leaving only the hum of the motel's neon sign. Relief washed through her, but it didn't erase the tension. She looked down, gathering herself. He wanted me for his empire, a trophy wife to make the shareholders smile. Do you know how it feels to realize you're someone's ornament? I shook my head. No, but I know what it's like to be invisible in your own home. Her eyes met mine, filled with something fragile. Then maybe we've both been furniture in someone else's story. Couldn't help it. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't move away. Instead, she leaned into my touch like she'd been waiting for it. In that small, borrowed moment, everything felt simple. 2 broken people finding something unbroken in each other. She exhaled, a trembling sound that melted into a laugh. I don't even know what this is. A mistake? A miracle? Maybe both, I said. But I'll take it. Her hand slid into mine. No grand gestures, no whispered proposals this time. Just warmth. And yet, it carried more weight than any promise I'd ever heard. Later, as I drove her back toward the hotel, she rested her head against the window. You know he won't stop. He'll push until one of us breaks. Then let him push. I said, I'm not leaving. Sophie Clark turned, studying me with a look that was half gratitude, half warning. Careful, Nathan Wells. You're starting to sound like someone who loves me. The words landed like a stone in water, rippling through me. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but the truth was already written on my face in the way my chest tightened every time she looked away. I didn't answer. Instead, I tightened my grip on the wheel, carrying us through the dark streets, knowing that whatever came next would test every word I just spoken. Because Sophie Clark was no longer just a stranger who whispered impossible questions. She was the question, and I wasn't sure I wanted the answer if it meant losing her. The final night didn't arrive with warning. Came like thunder after still air, sudden and close. Sophie Clark called me just after dusk. Her voice low but urgent. He's here, Nathan Wells. He found me. By the time I pulled up to the hotel, my pulse was hammering through my ribs. Sophie Clark stood outside with a single suitcase, her face pale but steady behind her near the entrance. A man in a dark suit leaned against a black car, watching us with the patience of a predator. His eyes followed every move she made. Sophie Clark slid into the passenger seat before I could open my mouth. "Drive," she whispered. I did. The man didn't follow. Not yet. But the weight of his gaze clung to my rear-view mirror until the hotel disappeared. We rode in silence until Sophie Clark finally spoke. He offered me a deal. Come back, marry him, and he'll let you walk away untouched. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor. Her laugh was bitter, sharp, as if my happiness is negotiable. I gripped the wheel tighter. And what did you say? She turned, her eyes blazing in the dim light. I told him no, because the only person who's treated me like more than a contract is sitting in this car. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe her words were armor, not desperation. But before I could answer, headlights flared in the mirror. Car was gaining on us. Black, sleek, inevitable. Sophie Clark stiffened. It's him. I turned off the main road, weaving through side streets, but the car followed, relentless. Finally, I pulled into an empty lot by the river. The engine idled as the black sedan stopped across from us. The man stepped out calm, calculated, as if he'd already won. Sophie Clark, he called, his voice smooth and cold. Enough games. Come with me now and this ends clean. Stay with him and he'll lose more than you're worth. I opened my door before Sophie Clark could stop me. She's not your possession, I said, the words scraping out of me like gravel. She made her choice. He studied me, then smirked. You think you're her salvation? You're a driver with nothing left but the crumbs of your life. She'll learn you're just another man who can't deliver. Sophie Clark's voice cut through the night, sharp and clear. Maybe he doesn't have money, but he has something you'll never own. Integrity. She stepped out, moving to stand beside me. Her hand found mine steady and sure, and that's worth more than every glass tower you hide behind. The man's expression hardened. For a moment I thought he'd come closer, but instead, he shook his head, climbed back into his car, and drove off. The roar of his engine swallowed by the river's silence. Sophie Clark exhaled, trembling. You just made an enemy you can't fight with fists or words. Then I'll fight him with time, I said. Every day you're not in his cage is a victory. Her eyes softened, shimmering with something I hadn't let myself hope for. Nathan Wells, when I first whispered those words in your car, I wasn't asking for marriage. I was testing fate. I wanted to see if anyone could hear the question behind the question. What question? I asked. She stepped closer, her voice breaking and mending at once. Will you stand with me even when it costs you? I looked at her, this woman who had turned my nights into fire and my silence into meaning. I thought of the loneliness I'd carried of the years spent surviving instead of living. And I realized I already had my answer. I lifted her hand, pressed it gently between mine. I already have. The river wind brushed past us, cool and clean, carrying away the remnants of fear. For the first time since she'd slipped into my car. Sophie Clark's smile was free, unguarded. She leaned into me, resting her forehead against mine. We didn't need promises or vows. We only needed that moment. Two lives no longer scripted by someone else's hand. The night didn't offer certainty. It didn't grant safety, but it gave us choice. And as I held her there, the world quieted except for the steady rhythm of the water. I understood love doesn't always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it begins with a whisper in the dark. And the courage to say yes when walking away would be easier. Sophie Clark whispered again, softer this time. Not a proposal, but a truth.